This horrifying story, which began in 2003, held the whole of England in suspense for 5 long years. A 17-year-old girl disappeared on her way home when she had less than a kilometer left to walk. Her belongings and phone were found in another city only several weeks later. Soon, everyone would learn the terrible truth, and the case would escalate to an international level. Hannah Foster was born on August 31, 1985, in the English city of Southampton. She lived with her mother, Hilary, and her father, Trevor. She also had an older sister, Sarah. At 17, the girl graduated from school with honors and was planning to enter university to study medicine. On March 14, 2003, Hannah went out with her friend. They visited 2 local pubs and, at around 10:50 p.m., decided to head home. She walked her friend to the bus stop and waited until she got on the bus. After that, Hannah decided to walk home, as it was just under a kilometer away. Alas, she never made it home. The next morning, her mother woke up for work and realized her daughter wasn't there. She sent her several text messages and tried to call, but there was no answer. After waiting for several hours, the anxious parents contacted the police at about 10:30. They immediately began searching for the girl and reconstructed the timeline of that evening. On street camera footage, they saw Hannah and her friend leaving the bar and walking towards the bus stop at 10:43 p.m. Next, investigators tried to track her phone's location. In those days, this could only be done using cell towers, and the accuracy of such tracking left much to be desired. All the police could determine was which tower was receiving the phone signal at that moment. They managed to establish that the phone was somewhere in the Portsmouth area, about a half-hour drive from Southampton. Soon, this information proved to be enough. Employees at a recycling center in Portsmouth reported finding a phone and a handbag in one of the containers. The police collected them and confirmed the items belonged to Hannah. But this did not help them find the girl herself. After examining the phone, detectives uncovered a disturbing fact. On the day of her disappearance, around 11 at night, Hannah had called the emergency services. She didn't say a single word to the operator. He could only hear some distant, unintelligible voices. Thinking someone had simply dialed the emergency number by accident, the operator transferred Hannah to a pre-recorded message. It stated that, if the person needed help, they should press 55 on their phone. But she never did. The police obtained a recording of this call and handed it over to experts. They managed to enhance the audio quality, but the words in the background were still impossible to make out. However, they did establish 2 important points. Analysis of the recording indicated that Hannah was in a vehicle significantly larger than a passenger car. Investigators suspected it might be a van. The second crucial factor was that one of the voices in the background belonged to an adult man with a South Asian accent. All of this suggested that Hannah might have been abducted, and that every minute was critical. Police reviewed hundreds of camera recordings from the area where Hannah disappeared and identified 7 vans, one of which could have belonged to the kidnapper. Unfortunately, it was already too late. On March 16th, the police received a call. A 14-year-old boy had spotted a human body on the side of Allington Lane. The deceased was identified as Hannah. The girl's parents couldn't believe their daughter was dead. She was just a kilometer from home, on a busy street. Who could have taken her and done this to her? Experts examined Hannah's body and concluded that she had been assaulted and the cause of death was strangulation. They managed to extract the perpetrator's biological material, but it yielded no matches in any databases. The police were now faced with the task of catching the monster. Who did this to a young girl with no serious leads to go on? The investigators decided to appeal to the public for help. they passed all available information to the BBC television channel for a program called Crime Watch. The purpose of the show is to inform the public about unsolved cases, often helping to find witnesses or others with valuable information. The program dedicated to Hannah aired on March 26th. It described the van and the adult male with a South Asian accent, who was highly likely to be the kidnapper. It worked. The day after the broadcast, the police received a call. A man named James Dennis explained that he was a manager at a food delivery company. He stated that one of his employees drove a van, spoke with a South Asian accent, and had been acting very strangely the day after the girl went missing. This employee was Maninder Kohli, a 40-year-old immigrant from India. His manager added several important details. On the day of Hannah's disappearance, Kohli did not leave the van at the parking lot, but drove it home. The next day, he only worked half of his shift, complaining of a backache. That same day, the manager noticed fresh scratches on his face. The police immediately confiscated the van. Inside, they found traces of blood and semen. But it was not enough to perform a DNA analysis, matching the sample taken from the victim's body. However, the police had another option. It turned out that Maninder Kohli had a wife and 2 children. Detectives went to their home and obtained a DNA sample from one of his sons. The man himself was not there. The result showed a match with the sample from Hannah's body. Police immediately issued a warrant for Kohli's arrest and began questioning his friends and relatives. His friend reported that on March 15th, the day after Hannah's murder, Kohli tearfully asked him for money for a plane ticket to India. He explained that his mother was seriously ill and he needed to fly to her. However, his friend refused to give him the money. On March 18th, Kohli was caught on surveillance cameras at a bus station, where he bought a ticket to Heathrow Airport. There, he purchased a plane ticket to Delhi and flew away, leaving his wife and 2 children behind in England. On April 3rd, the police issued an international arrest warrant for Kohli. However, the man was already in India, and local law enforcement couldn't find him. At first, it was thought that Kohli might be hiding with relatives, but at that time, only his father remained, and he vehemently denied that he would help his son hide. After that, the case went cold for a while. Indian law enforcement couldn't locate the suspect, and it began to seem as though he would escape justice. This went on for over a year. The heartbroken parents, desperate for justice, traveled to India themselves in July 2004. They appeared on local television and set up a hotline for anyone who might have information about the suspect's whereabouts. The Hampshire Constabulary also offered a reward of £60,000 for information leading to Kohli's capture. For India, this was an enormous sum, which helped to attract thousands of people to the search. Very soon, this bore fruit. A taxi driver called the police and reported that he had repeatedly given a ride to a similar-looking man. During their conversations, the man told the driver that he worked as a courier in England and had come to India for a holiday. This information apparently helped the police immensely. On July 15, they announced Kohli's arrest. It turned out the man had been living under a false name and had even married a local woman. As soon as he heard that Hannah's story was receiving widespread media coverage, the criminal decided to flee the country. The police were almost too late. He and his new wife were captured at the border with Nepal. A few weeks later, a local TV channel aired a video in which Kohli confessed to the murder of Hannah Foster. The criminal explained that he had had too much to drink at a local bar that evening and was about to head home. Leaving the bar, he noticed Hannah on the street. He waited for the right moment when there were no witnesses, drove up to her, pushed her into the van, and took her to the place where the police would later find her body. The man assaulted her and ended the girl's life. It seemed the case was nearing its logical conclusion. However, another unexpected problem arose. The Indian authorities were in no hurry to extradite Kohli to the United Kingdom. The criminal filed appeals, trying with all his might to avoid extradition. This went on for nearly 3 years, during which Hannah's family lived in constant anticipation. They visited India 3 times and gave interviews in the hope that public attention would help achieve justice.
This delay is unfair on us, and if the accused is innocent, just as unfair on him. No one is benefiting from this delay. Nobody can get on with his or her life until a decision is reached on extradition. It can't be allowed to drag on indefinitely. Hilary and I made a promise that we wouldn't rest until Hannah's killer was brought to justice. 4 years later, that promise is still a long way from being honoured, but we are no less determined. Our lives are now totally preoccupied with achieving justice for Hannah, and this responsibility is physically and emotionally exhausting.
On July 28, 2007, Coley became the first person ever to be extradited from India to Britain. Upon arrival, he was immediately charged with a series of offenses related to Hannah's death. Despite the video recording of his confession, he began to deny his involvement. Coley claimed that the Indian police had forced him to confess under duress. For this reason, he had to go through a full trial. It began a year later, on October 13, 2008. Given the evidence presented by the prosecutor, the court quickly found Coley guilty and delivered its verdict on November 25. 24 years in prison. The judge also recommended that he not be released before the age of 63. Hannah's relatives had waited for justice for 5 long years. In their statement at the final court hearing, they expressed their hope that Coley would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The public's reaction to the sentence was mixed. Some considered it fair, while others wondered why British citizens should have to support this monster at their own expense. Let's be honest, English prisons may be far from Norwegian standards. But for an immigrant from India, such conditions could hardly be called a punishment. As for the £60,000 reward, it was divided among 12 people who had assisted in the investigation. One of them was the taxi driver who had reported giving Coley rides. What he did with the money touched the entire British public. Taking his share of the reward, he bought a plot of land and began building a school on it for underprivileged children. The school was named in memory of Hannah Foster. Hannah's parents learned about this in 2006 during another visit to India. Upon returning to Britain, they helped organize a charity fundraiser to support the school. This horrific story once again tells us that danger can lurk around any corner. Even in a major British city, on a busy street, people cannot feel safe. And as the case of Sarah Everard, which shocked Britain in 2021 shows, some things don't change for decades. What do you think? Was the sentence Hannah Foster's killer received a just one? Should he have been extradited to England, or should justice have been pursued in India? Share your opinion in the comments. Thanks for watching.